all about humanity. It's all about humanity.
Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. In this one I'm going to be doing some more work to the X2 1100 triple swap, and this is probably going to be focused mostly around the drive shaft and the couplers. I currently have the crankshaft sitting in the hull, and I will show you guys quickly what it looks like in there and kind of how close it runs to the back wall. I have the case installed on the bed plate installed in the hull, and the crankshaft installed in the case, so the crank is basically in the orientation where it's going to sit. And if you look back here, you can see that quite clearly the crankshaft is, or the coupler rather, is quite close to this rear bearing. So I actually need to cut about 3 inches out of the X2 shaft in order to make this work. I currently have the rubber bushing out of the 650 or out of the X2 in this coupler, and the two couplers fit together quite well. For those of you who are not familiar with the jet ski drive system or jet ski couplers, basically you just have the end of the crankshaft, you have one coupler, then you have some sort of rubber bushing, inserts in there like that, and then you have another coupler that is on the drive shaft, and they slide together like that. It provides a little bit of cushioning and allows for slight misalignment while still transmitting the power to the impeller. This is a 650 crank with a 650 coupler. This is a 650 shaft with a 650 coupler. And this is the 1100 coupler, which is obviously a lot bigger. However, the rubber bushing fits in there just as it would on the 650 one. As you can see, that slides in there exactly how it would on the 650 one. The only difference is that it pushes on a different part of the finger, or the different part of the cog, whatever you want to call it. It's pushing on the thin part of this web instead of out here where it would push normally. Because I have a lathe and I have an extra coupler on this crankshaft, I'm going to try to remove both of the couplers from the 650 and the 1100 cranks. I'm going to try to thread the 650 coupler out to the size of the 1100 crank, and yeah, then I'm going to attempt to cut my drive shaft and weld it back together. This could be a long video. This is a test dummy crank because it already needs to be rebuilt. And as far as the coupler goes, well, I'm hoping not to break it. Oh, and it broke. Okay, that takes care of that. I know that I got the coupler off of my X2, so I don't know why it didn't come off this one. Ordinarily, if you were going to shorten a shaft like this, what you would do is you would cut out the piece that you want to cut out. In this case, I want to cut out between the bearing and the coupler. I need to cut out 3 inches in this area. So you would cut that piece out, you would bevel the edges, slide the two pieces together, clamp it in a piece of Anglo iron, and then weld it together. and you would have a nice straight shaft. The problem with this is that I actually have 3 different diameters on this shaft. So I have 20 millimeters here, 19 millimeters here, and 21 millimeters here. So they're all different diameters, so that won't work. So the first thing I'm going to do to try to make this work, I'm going to turn part of the end of the shaft down to the same diameter as this. I decided to check a few things as a bit of a reality check, and so that I had a reasonable goal. And currently, from the bearing surface to the end of the shaft, it has about 6 thousandths run out. So if I can get it to 6 thousandths run out, that means I will be getting it as good as the factory one was. So that's kind of a reasonable goal. The next thing I need to do is measure this part of the shaft to see if it is actually running true with this part. I don't want to machine the shaft with it sticking out this far, so I'm going to grab it here with a chuck. The problem is that if this part of the shaft isn't true and I machine this, then that untrueness will be transferred over into this part. So I have my dial indicator now sitting on the shaft where I'm going to be grabbing it, and it's the same thing. It's off by about 6 thousandths. I need to remove the coupler off of the X2 drive shaft so that I can turn it down more easily without the coupler being in the way. And so I did a Google search to find a coupler removal tool, and actually a Jet Ski Brothers video popped up with Jacob explaining to use an air hammer or an air chisel to remove coupler, and that is completely counterintuitive to me. I would have thought that it would just break the teeth off. I would think that it would just cut the teeth off, but he did it in the video, and then I did it on a coupler on a crankshaft, and it spun it off almost effortlessly. And it kind of makes sense that it would, but yeah, it did very little damage to the coupler and spun it right off. So I'm actually going to do a couple of things. I've got one of these cheap Campbell Hussafield chisel guns, air hammers, and yeah, that's what it does. And so I'm going to find the most blunt tip that I can, and I've also put some tape on the coupler so that it hopefully doesn't damage it too much. So anyway, we're gonna give this a try. Thanks to Jet Ski Brothers and Jacob for showing this trick. I would have completely just assumed that it would cut the tab off, and I wouldn't have tried this because I would have been scared that it would completely ruin the coupler. So thanks to Jacob for that. Alright, I found chisel for the air hammer that was rounded off quite a bit by using it on concrete. So I've put it in the air hammer, and I touched up the end of it on the belt sander just to smoothen it out a bit to increase my odds of not marring this coupler up. I think, yeah, it's just spinning in the chuck. I think this might be Loctited. I managed to get some heat into it with my propane torch. It looks like the Loctite has changed color, so now I'm going to find that same spot on the coupler. No sense damaging 2 of them. There we go. Oh, I can smell the Loctite. Does anybody want to guess what happened and why my coupler got broken, even though I heated it and used an air hammer? The answer is my GoPro. I wanted to film this, but my GoPro shut off in the middle of filming. The Loctite cooled off and grabbed enough so that when I used the air hammer on it, it broke the coupler anyway. Yep. Okay. There's my stainless steel washer. What I did to figure out exactly how much I needed to cut off this shaft was measured from the bolt that holds the bearing carrier on to the coupler on the X2. And that was this distance. It's about 8 1/16 of an inch. And then what I did was I measured from the bolt to the ZXI coupler, and I got a mark here. So the bolt to the ZXI coupler is from there to there, and then the material that needs to be cut off to make it that long is 3.278 inches. Now what I need to do is some very careful measuring to make sure that I haven't had a brain fart, and then I will cut this shaft and make it work. That is 17.9 and this is 19. 17.9 and 1904. So I definitely have enough here to put a thread on it. The question is then there won't be enough of a shoulder, so I'll have to use a stainless washer or weld a bead on or something to make an actual shoulder to where the coupler sits on. Okay, after checking the chart on my lathe, I can turn 1.5 thread. That is right here for the metric threads. It's coming down to the wire. There's not going to be any turning back, only crying if I'm mistaken. So 2.4 is what I'm going to cut this off at. I had an idea that I thought was a little bit ingenious, and I did some work off camera just so that this video wouldn't be too long and boring. I ended up cutting the shaft off at 2.3 inches, so I cut 2.3 inches off the shaft. And then I machined out the center of a broken coupler so that it slides over the shaft. Now I have everything mounted in the hull, and as you will see when I slide the engine backwards, it actually hits the end of the crankshaft. So the drive shaft is actually hitting the crankshaft. I'll try to get you guys a shot of that, but I'll try to explain what's happening right now. Then what I can do is actually take the old drive coupler and slide it into place. And once the old drive coupler is in place, I can mark at the back side of that drive coupler, and I know exactly where my shaft has to be cut. Hopefully you guys can see this. When I slide the engine back into place, the two shafts actually touch, and when they touch, my holes are lined up. And then I can slide this coupler forward into the place where it's going to sit, and then once I remove the engine or slide the engine back, it now exposes the shaft, and I can see exactly where the shaft needs to be cut. I'm now going to fit this all together off camera to make 100% sure that I don't bump the coupler and move it or something, because if that happens, I will cut the shaft in the wrong place. I'm also going to take everything out and measure the distance between the couplers. Right now I have the couplers actually touching together, but when the rubber is in there, there will be a little bit more clearance, so that means the shaft has to actually be cut a little bit shorter than I would. So what I'm going to do is take everything out, check the actual distance between the couplers, take that into consideration, mark the shaft, pull it out, cut it to the right length, and Bob's your auntie. I just measured everything up very carefully, and I need to take another 770 thousandths off to get to the face of the coupler. And just to make sure that it was actually 770 thousandths, I've actually marked it or measured it in 3 different ways. So So what I did is I slid the coupler on. I used a file to scribe a mark on the back side. I used a marker to mark a mark on the front side. And I also took a measurement from the face of the shaft to the face of the coupler. And so all of those things line up. I can now remove this material. I'll remove the 770 thousandths. Test fit number 2. I've got the rubber cushion thing. Put that on there. Grab this behemoth of a crankshaft. We'll put the rubber cushion in the 1100 crankshaft. And then we'll do that. And okay, wow. We're actually lined up perfectly. I'll still need to do some shimming to get the alignment perfect, but I am extremely pleased with that. I don't know if you guys can see, but the holes are lining up here. And with the cushion in there, it is perfectly seated. Everything is butted together, and I actually have a little bit of leeway in the forward direction. I think I will remove another 50 thousandths just to make sure that when I get this thing in there, I don't get any kind of weird rumble or anything. Right now, as it is, the shafts are both pushing together on the cushion from each side. When I tighten this up, it could cause some heating issues in the cushion, or it could cause a weird noise or something. So I'm going to take the shaft out, remove another 50 thousandths off of it, and then thread it. But before I thread it, I think what I'll actually do is lay some beads of weld on it to build up a shoulder that I can then turn down so that I will have a shoulder for the coupler. Instead of using the old washer, I'm actually just going to build the shaft up so that it's 26 millimeters, and then I can turn down the edge and yeah, make a perfect fit. I just got done welding. It took longer than I thought it would. I've got a big old glob of weld on there now. And I stopped the heat from going too far. I just kept dousing it in water. I can't imagine this will be too interesting, but what the heck, let's film it anyway. I got a nice shoulder turn down there. I tapered it a little bit on the back side of it. And now I need to cut some threads in here, so that's what I'm going to do next. So the bad news is that this stuff is so hard that it's breaking my tungsten tips. And if it continues doing that, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm not sure how I'm going to thread this. Oh yeah, snapped the tungsten completely on that one. And that was only taking like 3 thousandths. If I can heat this up enough to anneal it, then maybe it will soften some. Because right now I'm running out of ideas real quick. I found out some bad news about 308L stainless, which is what I use to weld the flange on here. The thing that I found out that's bad news is that it work hardens. So what that means is that when you cut it or hammer on it, or yeah, work it, it gets harder. It's actually working. Oh, okay, that was fun. 701, 702. All right, it's much better, but it still needs a couple of cleanup passes, I think. That's gonna screw in all the way. Huh. Okay. It just screwed on all the way. All right, jet ski fans, now is the moment of truth where we find out if I did my measurements properly or if I goofed up and I'm gonna have to buy a new shaft. Hours and hours of work went into welding a bunch of beads of weld on here and then turning them down so it was a flange. All of that so I wouldn't have to use a washer or weld something else onto there. But as you can see, it comes out perfectly to the end of the coupler, so that is awesome. We're now going to fit this in place, put the case in, and yeah, see if the crank fits in. Slide that into there. Everyone, cross your fingers and your toes, cross your eyes, cross your T's. All right. We'll put that there. Drop the crank in. Let's hope this drops in easy. Sometimes it's miserable to get everything lined up. The crank is basically set in place. Let's see if we can slide this forward and line up with the coupler. There we go. Boom, right into place. Wow, that is a nice fit. So let's see, when we push it all the way back, we're right at the back side of the holes. So I've got a tiny little bit of play, which is exactly what I wanted. Wow, that is nice. That is buttery. There we have it, all bolted down. Well, 2 bolts. That is very nice. I'm pretty sure my 650 engine doesn't line up that nicely. I still need to make sure that it's perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do is try to get a long shaft that goes through there and through the cases without using the crankshaft, and basically just align everything perfectly. This project felt like it took a really long time, but in all honesty, I got it done in 1 day, which is a lot quicker than most of the things that I do. I still have a lot of tidying up to do, but it is currently almost 1 in the morning, so I'm gonna go in and try to upload this footage onto my computer, I guess. I'm not sure what's gonna be in the next video. It's probably gonna be odds and ends. There's kind of not a lot of major projects from here on out. It's basically just going to be like trying to figure out exactly where to put my battery, trying to figure out what to do with fiberglass work, trying to figure out where to put my fuel tank and which fuel tank to use, rewiring, taking all the 650 stuff out. I still have all the stuff for the 650 ignition system, and yeah. Not sure what's going to be in the next video, but that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
It's all about humanity. About humanity.